Eskom is a step closer to the creation of a standalone transmission company. This comes after the National Assembly passed the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill. The legislation, known as the ERA Bill, aims to provide new generation capacity by introducing private investors and better electricity infrastructure. Now, Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe says the bill will also modernize the struggling energy sector, adding that the bill is not an ANC bill and should be supported. Now, most political parties gave their support, saying it took long enough. But to make sense of this bill, let's welcome energy expert Chris Yelland. Chris, good morning to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Always a pleasure. I think we hear, and I'm speaking now as the everyday South African, we hear, okay, the passing of an electricity regulation amendment bill and that it's going to give us more capacity where a power supply is concerned. We just want to know that that the crisis that we're facing is going to get better. But is this a step in the right direction as we try and unpack what this bill actually means for us?
Yes, I do think that this is an extremely important step on the way to a restructured electricity supply industry. It really sets the legal framework necessary for the unbundling of Eskom and for the creation of a new and more market-orientated electricity supply industry. Look, it is not going to end load shedding in the next year. This is a legal framework which really charts the way for the restructuring of Eskom, which will have very significant benefits in the medium term. But one mustn't see this as, as some immediate step for the reduction of load shedding in the short term.
Yeah. And that's what we need to clarify, because I think we might get a little bit too excited when we know there's still quite a long way to go here. And then what the bill does is it makes provision for a state-owned transmission system operator to be established. Explain what that would do.
Yeah, so this really sets the framework for separating the transmission business of Eskom out of the rest of Eskom, create a separate and nominally independent company, which is a subsidiary of Eskom Holdings in the first period, that is perhaps for the next 5 years. But thereafter will become a truly independent grid operator. And the importance of this is it creates a level playing field upon which all generators, not only Eskom generators, but other generators, independent power producers, municipal electricity generators, and even what we call prosumers, that is customers of electricity who generate electricity, where they all have equal access to the grid. And this removes some of the stumbling blocks to investment, where in the past preference has been given to Eskom generation. So it really lays the framework necessary to establish a diversified and competitive generation sector. And it's important that the transmission sector should be independent from the generators that exist, that is Eskom, if you want to encourage new entrants into this sector.
Yeah, of course, there's been a lot of talk around the role of the energy minister, who I believe, previously obviously has been quite, words used in articles are also ambivalent about the role of the private sector in energy providing. But he's called this a significant milestone. I mean, what do you make of that? I suppose the change in tune of the energy minister.
Look, it is sometimes very confusing to interpret the words of different government ministers, and sometimes they don't appear to speak on a consistent basis, and they don't seem to be on the same page. But certainly, it is encouraging, that the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy is supporting this modernization and of the electricity supply industry. The point is that the current electricity supply industry is not working.
Yeah.
And it's madness just to continue with a system that's not working. So it needs to be reformed in line with best practice internationally. One thing I do want to just add is that we mustn't be overexcited. Look, I am excited that this has been passed by the National Assembly, but there is a way to go still. It has not yet been signed into law by the President. and before that it needs to go to the Council of Provinces, etc. And remember, there is a general election coming up in May, and there will be a new administration thereafter, and that new administration may comprise a coalition with other parties. So there is the possibility, of further changes, but I am heartened that it has achieved fairly broad multi-party support, and that, augurs well that it will ultimately, be signed into law, perhaps some months after the general election.
Yeah, talk to us about the role of NERSA now as we start to move forward. I mean, one of the things that we've heard from opposition parties is their concern around the central role that the bill also still gives to the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. I think for South Africans, the everyday South African, who I try to bring into the conversation, because we're the ones that are going to be impacted by these changes in legislation. When we hear the term or the word NERSA, or the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, we know that they are the ones who determine how much we pay for electricity. So talk to us about the role of NERSA as we look at these changes in legislation.
Look, if one is moving to a more market-orientated electricity supply industry, one would expect that prices would be set more by competition amongst generators, as opposed to a prescriptive price regulation process. But I think that was a step too far for government, and they have solidified the role of NERSA going forward, which to me is somewhat disturbing, because in fact NERSA has not covered itself in glory in its regulatory role. And many of the problems that Eskom currently face, are a result, and not only that Eskom face, but South Africa face, are as a result of inadequate pricing, and the price setting role of NERSA has been inadequate. There have been a number of court applications by Eskom challenging NERSA, which NERSA has lost, and the role of, as I say, of NERSA has not been covered in glory, and one would expect that its role would decrease as one moves to a more market-orientated environment where the prices are set by competition as opposed by regulation. But I suppose one has to move step by step in these things, and to gain confidence, and that one doesn't want to. I think government sees this as a step too far and too fast, and is putting in place some guardrails or brakes on the process going forward, so that it doesn't seem to be too radical a move forward.
Okay, I'm running out of time, but I need to squeeze two questions in. The one is the opposition party also having raised concerns around the Minister of Energy really making the decisions around the procurement of new energy. Is that a concern?
Well, it is to the DA, and to be frank, it is to me, and I think it should be to everybody. To put too much power in the hands of a person, a minister, I think is not wise. I think the powers need to be broadened to the extent where there needs to be more than just the power of one person or one position. So I think it's a very valid point, of concern that has been raised. But again, we come from a history of what you might call centralized planning and, command and control type of economy. And it's quite hard mentally to, for people who've been in that mindset for many years, to change, to a new environment, which does not have this command and control approach, but leaves decision making not to the minister, but to industry and to customers themselves.
Yeah. Of course, we talked about time frames, and I think those are perhaps a little bit disappointing to South Africans, that we're not going to get immediate reprieve from load shedding as a result of the ERA bill. But we are joining, just over 100 nations that have unbundled transmission from generation. I mean, let's talk about the examples that we've seen. An example perhaps that stands out in other parts of the world that has yielded really good results.
Look, there are many, many countries, that have embarked on electricity sector reform. You've mentioned, it's more than 100, in fact. And in fact, South Africa is something of an outlier in that it has not yet reformed its electricity sector, although it has been talked about since 1998. The initial plans for the unbundling of Eskom, the creation of separate generation, transmission and distribution, were in the government white paper of 1998. It's been the official government policy for the last 25 years. But we finally only got down to getting our head around this now. So there are many, many countries, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Australia and New Zealand, and in the East. So there's just been so many reforms, and they really are essential as we move into a new world where there are new technologies driving prices in a different direction downwards. And we need to really become part of this reform, and this is a good step forward, late though it is incoming.
Yeah. Chris, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure. Chris Yelland, of course, is an energy expert and analyst speaking to us this morning.